Now what I am about to say may sound a bit kooky and hypocritical for someone that made a series called The Gaming Codex that's all about defining exactly what a game genre is, as well as other stuff that sort of slid in there. But game genres kinda suck when you think about it, don't they? About 10 years ago, I was talking to a friend of mine over Yahoo Messenger about an adventure I just had in Guild Wars' PvP where I hid behind a tree and proceeded to rain fire and doom and death upon the entire enemy party and won. He misunderstood that. He thought I was the tree. And that's how we came up with the concept of Treemageddon, an MMO based entirely on the idea that trees have risen up and are destroying everything. And we proceeded, as a joke, to design it. Well, mostly he did. And he made World of Warcraft with trees. Because that's what he thought of as an MMO being. Him knowing what people were expecting the MMO to be, him having experienced the MMO through World of Warcraft, colored his entire experience to the MMO being just that, to being just one tiny little box and nothing else. Whereas with a concept like Treemageddon, you could have gone completely nuts. There are no rules when you're dealing with something that ridiculous, are there? And yet everything was so constrained, so restrained, so by the book, and the book was how to build World of Warcraft and nothing else. And yet a lot of people use it to build other MMOs and not just a bunch of people over the web using Yahoo Messenger to make jokes about trees. And what it boils down to is that a gaming genre can quite often stifle creation. It can limit creativity. It can have a negative impact upon what people can actually make and want to make and are capable of making. Like for example, Dead Rising, the game that I know you wanted a history of it, and I may still do one, but until then, this is the show you're getting. What is Dead Rising? In very, very, very broad terms, it's an action game. Action as a genre is so broad, it describes nothing. Absolutely nothing. It can be anything. It can be River Raid, it can be Grand Theft Auto. Technically, River Raid is a scrolling shooter, but for the purposes of vagueness, let's call it an action game. You can't really put Dead Rising in a box, or you couldn't when it came out. I mean, this is a game where you fight zombies, isn't it? Well, no, it's not really that. Yeah, there are zombies in it and you do fight them, but that's not the idea of the game. The idea of the game is that you are Frank West. You are a photojournalist that's covered wars, and this sort of became the arrow-to-the-knee joke of its age, that goes into a town that is cordoned off by the military for some reason, where people are dying, there's riots in the streets, people are eating people, driving each other off buildings, and you wind up in a mall, where you find out that there are zombies. You don't know why there are zombies, and you try to figure out what's going on and make a story about it. And in your attempt to document this incident, you're going to run into some very kooky, colorful characters. You're gonna have to save a couple of them from the zombies. You're gonna have to save a couple of them from deranged people that are just running around doing something really stupid, like driving a Humvee in a mall full of zombies and shooting the people instead of the zombies. And along the way, you'll do your own kooky stuff, like play dress up, or shoot tennis balls at zombies, or run them over with shopping carts. The game still felt from the onset like it leaned more towards, well, maybe not super duper ultra horror, but it was a bit more grounded. Whereas the sequels, I think they all kind of missed the point of that. They front-loaded the ridiculousness to the point where when they did add more serious elements, like in Off the Record, the better version of Dead Rising 2, when they added Chuck Green in there as one of the psychopaths, it is actually jarring to see him and why he's like that. Whereas it wouldn't have been as much had the game not begun with Frank West wrestling zombies in a ring. And the thing is, you would say that, well, it's a Japanese game, they are ridiculous. Well, yeah, Dead Rising 1 was a Japanese game. Dead Rising 2 and 3 and the others, they weren't. They were published by Capcom, but they were made in Canada. The first one, however, was made in Japan, and you can see that because of the way it is. It's not boxed into something we've known all that well up until now. It's not a clear copy-paste of something existing. It's not in a box. It doesn't conform to a genre. You may say, well, it's sort of like a roguelike in a way. I mean, you're sort of probably not going to manage to do everything perfectly, and you'll fail and you'll run out of time and you'll have to restart and do things a bit better next time. But it doesn't have any of the trappings of a roguelike. It just has sort of partly some of the feel of it. It is its own thing. And that's because Japan is a more isolated area when it comes to its own culture, its own flavors for design, for creativity. Whereas in the West, we just copy-paste pretty much anything. And when we have FPSs because everybody remade Doom, wasn't because of Maze War. Maze War didn't sell. Doom sold, so everybody made Doom. Of course, Japan isn't actually immune to this as well. I mean, Resident Evil is, for the most part, a copy-paste of Alone in the Dark. And you're gonna say, well, Dawn of the Dead. Dead Rising is Dawn of the Dead. It's the same idea. Well, yeah, but it's its own game, it's its own thing as a game. And at their foundation, JRPGs are just rip-offs of Ultima and Wizardry, ones that in most aspects have not evolved at all in ages. Mechanically, they're still as simplistic and as dull as they were 30 years ago, but they get along just fine thanks to emotion, thanks to the story and the characters, who themselves have not evolved at all in 30 years. They're the same archetypes, exact to a T. Same storylines even, in many ways. Same beats. They repeat. But there's emotion in them, there's strength in them, and they look nice. But you also get games like Katamari Damacy, you get games like Shadow of the Colossus, you get games that are not definable in a mold, they're unique. You get games that aren't hampered by what a developer should have done. They're not limited by what a publisher decided that, oh, we're gonna do a game that's in this genre, so it must be like this one. Don't stray from that formula too much, just add a few more things. You have games that are free of the notion of a game genre. You have games like Dead Rising, where your progression is very much tied in your ability to stage incidents that you can take photographs of and gain a lot of XP. Or PP, pause for laughter here. And you also have games like the Persona series, that's about going to school during the day, doing school stuff, and at night, oh yeah, ascending a tower to kill God. Sure, it has some of the ideas of the JRPG in it, of the RPG, but it's its own thing. You can't confuse it for something else. It is its own thing. It's the freedom of not being boxed in. And you may say to yourself, well, everybody has that freedom. It's not like somebody's making people just create a certain type of game. But there is the market. The market is usually more biased towards things it knows, because it can't be anything else. If it doesn't know something, it can't know that it'll be good or not. It must know something to want to buy it. This is why every movie is pretty much the same goddamn thing. It's based on that assumption that you get scripts for movies that are essentially the same. There was a book running around Hollywood a couple of years ago about how to write a screenplay. And it pretty much said that during some part of the movie, the villain has to get captured, locked behind a jail cell that's made of glass, and taunt the heroes, and then escape and something else. And you saw that in every goddamn movie. You saw it in Star Trek, the crappy Khan, and in the Avengers, and in Skyfall. I think it was Skyfall, one of them. It was in a lot of movies. And yes, that may be just a lazy copy-pasty way of making a movie, but it goes beyond that, because a movie, like a game, like a book, is supposed to have a certain structure. People expect it to have a certain structure, expect it to have a certain flow. You are pretty much told when you're writing a book, when you're making a movie, when you're doing anything, that you need to have this structure where it begins like this, then something happens, then it goes like this, then something else happens, then this, and then this. That is honestly bonkers mad. You're basically telling everybody that you can't create what you want. You have to create something like this. Exactly like this. You can have a couple of flourishes, yeah, but you have to maintain this recipe. Sure, it's a proven recipe, it's a successful recipe, but in teaching it to people, in telling them that this is how you make things, that this is how things should be, you're eliminating the possibility of them coming up with their own ideas, with their own way of making things. Yeah, they could be utter failures. They could be The Room, but they could also be Shadow of the Colossus. They could be Dead Rising. They could be Papers, Please. They could be something that is not defined by a genre, that is not restricted by one, that is not stifled by people's expectation of what they should be, of what they can be. And in that aspect, game genres absolutely suck. When you tell someone what an RTS is, and they want to make something similar, they're going to try and make an RTS as we know it to be. They're not going to innovate. They're not going to try and do something crazy, wild, and mad. You've already molded their expectations. You've already killed their creativity. And it wasn't malevolent, it wasn't intentional, it's just how things end up. The more successful idea destroys the one that wasn't yet formed, that wasn't yet finished, that wasn't yet ready, and gets abandoned. Now, I'm not saying that fundamentally all game genres should be abolished. We have them for reasons, so that people will better understand what they're playing. So it'll be easier for them to know what they're playing. It'll be easier for people to sell games, to identify their games. And that does come at the cost of the unidentifiable, at the cost of putting everything in a box. But at least you can all agree that, in spite of all of this, Dear Esther is still not a game. But the Stanley Parable, however, is. And the Stanley Parable doesn't conform to many things. You can say it's an adventure-ish kind of affair, but also has ties to the roguelike genre because you're expected to fail constantly until you achieve your goal, your end point. One of them at least. But it's fundamentally its own thing. It is unique and it's astonishing and it's one of the greatest games I ever played. And it's not in a box. It's outside of the box, looking down at you. You are in the box and it's laughing at you. It's mocking you and it's doing it audibly. And that's why it's so amazing. I'm curious, what's your favorite game that you believe does not fit a mold, that defies genres, that just goes above and beyond everything? What attracts you to it? And do you see it as being the foundation of what could be its own genre, or do you see it as just something unique that should be treasured and not copy-pasted until oblivion comes and sweeps everything into nothingness? Please leave a comment with your opinion. Goodbye.